I want you to make it better. I want you to make it better. And the question is going to be, what if he never makes it better? You see, I'm here. Praise the Lord. Okay, they're hallelujah. And they can go, aren't you miserable? No, I'm really not. What do you have that I don't have? Don't shut down. Don't give up. Don't become bitter. Surround yourself with people who love Jesus. But I promise you that I think today you'll be really, really encouraged at the very end, because I learned something I never even thought of. Okay, for those of you watching us online or Roku or any of the ways you found us, if you want to know more about our ministry, go to womensbiblestudy.com and you can learn everything you want to know about us there. Also, for those of you that are here and maybe you're new and you don't know this, we have apps for your phone, your Windows, iPhone, Android. You just have to go to your app store, search for Women's Bible Study, and we're always the pink box with that says Women's Bible Study. Okay, let's start. I have to tell you, my sister gave this, she handed it to me at her store the other day, and I thought it was the funniest thing, and so we're putting it up here so you can see. I'm the man of this house, so starting tomorrow, I want you to have a hot, delicious meal ready for me the second I walk through the door. Afterwards, while watching ESPN and relaxing in my chair, you'll bring me my slippers and then run my bath, and when I'm done with my bath, guess who's going to dress me and comb my hair? The funeral director. I'm like, that is classic. That is just way too perfect. So I thought that was kind of funny. Okay, new series, Life is a Battle. I cannot tell you how excited I am for this. And this is what I hope that we learn through this whole thing, is that God is going to be our greatest warrior of all time. And that's what I want us to really get through this series. He fights for us. He makes a way for us. He goes before us. He's ever present in all of our battles. And I want, by the end of this series, for God to become so big in our life that we never, ever, ever have to worry about anything anymore. Because I think the tendency is that we worry and we fret and we have anxiety, and so we drink more and we take more pills to go to sleep and we take pills during the day. And because the world is just so anxiety-ridden, and we don't want that as followers of Christ. We want it to be that we say, I'm not worried about anything because God goes before me and He's the greatest warrior, and that's what I'm hoping happens when we're all done with this series. Now, today is going to be very, very odd, and it's like I realized this week that I should have been a Bible history teacher, because there is something about Bible history that makes me so excited, because what it does for me is it takes my faith and it just catapults it. Because when I can see all the places in the Bible that are actually literal places in this world that we live in, and then I realize that Jesus was a historical figure, but everything also goes along, He goes along with history, and that's in our history books. And then I see, well, okay, if that's true, then what He says has to be true. And so therefore my faith grows even more because of everything I see in the Middle East and who Jesus is. So today we are going to make 2 points. I'll tell you when the points are so you can remember them. And we have lots and lots of stuff to go through. So I want to start with Joshua, because in order to understand what Joshua does, we have to get this like 30,000-foot view of what's going on in who he is and where he came on this timeline. And so I want to start in your handout. You have kind of like a timeline. And I want to start all the way back at creation. And I know that's kind of a long way, but it's really not if you think about it. Now, about before 4000 BC, before Christ, we have creation. Now, some of you are old earth people and young earth people, and so we're not going to argue about that for the sake of just whatever. We're just going to say somewhere around 4000 BC is when God created everything according to what the Bible says at this point. Then you have, of course, the Garden of Eden. Then 3000 BC, you have from Adam to Noah. At 2,500 years before Christ, you have the flood. So now God comes in and wipes everything out. 2091, about 450 years later, we have Abram comes on the scene. And we've talked a lot about Abraham over the past ways. And what we learn about Abraham is that he lived in modern-day Iraq. And God called him and said, I want you to start a new nation in the land of Israel, what's modern-day Israel as of today. So we see that in 2091. In 2085 BC, Abraham was promised by God to have many, many descendants, but of course he didn't have any children. Then in 2066, his son, Isaac, is born. And Isaac is going to be the lineage of the Jewish nation and also the lineage of Jesus. So you can kind of see this whole big view that's going on in history at this particular time. Now, Isaac is born, ends up growing up. He has a son, he has two sons, Jacob and Esau. Jacob ends up having 12 children, and 12 sons, actually. One of his sons is Joseph. Now, he has 10 older boys. 11th son is Joseph. The 10 older ones hate him, so they decide that they're going to, all this does have a point to Joshua, by the way. His 10 sons the brothers hate him, so they send him, they sell him into a slave truck or slave caravan going into Egypt, hoping that they'll never ever see him again. They come home, say, Joseph's dead. Dad, sorry, he got eaten by an animal. It's too bad, so sad for Joseph. Joseph is now in Egypt. Okay, now that's really, really key. Now, I want to show you our first map up here, because this is a map of the Middle East right now. And I want you to see right in the middle top up there, it's also in your handout if it's easier to see there, you have Iran, then you have Iraq to the left of that, and then you've got Syria. Man, they're all in a world of hurt over there right now with ISIS, aren't they? Then you look at the left, right up against the water, you see Lebanon. Right below there is Israel. Now, Israel is a teeny tiny little place on that map. It's shocking. I love Joel Rosenberg. He wrote a book called Epicenter, that Israel is the epicenter of everything. Now, the reason why I know that no one's going to take over Israel is because Jesus, when he comes back, he will stand on the Mount of Olives. He'll come back, and that's where he will come back at, right on the Mount of Olives. So these are all historical places, and that's why I love God so much, and I love the Bible. So today we're going to see lots of stories for the next series, and I want you to get excited about the Bible because it's the greatest, most awesome book to read ever. Now, right below Israel, you see Egypt. Okay, so what just happened is the 10 sons and all of the 11 brothers, Jacob and all, now they've all had kids and grandkids, and they all live in Israel. And Joseph, their one brother, is now in Egypt. Now, he got to Egypt, and a man by the name of Potiphar bought him as a slave. Potiphar's wife thought Joseph was really hot. He was probably about 18, and she wants to sleep with him. He says, no way, I could never do that to, my boss, but mostly my God, who I love. And so she cries rape. He ends up in prison, and this is just this crazy story from there. Now, he's stuck in Egypt. I wanted to show you the next map. I always like to show you this because I want you to see that Israel today is there. Now, if you look up there, you see the West Bank. Anything in that color of the West Bank, and then you look down there where you see Gaza, it's kind of in that darker, creamier color, whatever it is. Those are in Israel, but they're Palestinian-run territory. So if you actually go to Bethlehem and Jericho, we'll be talking a lot about Jericho. Those are actually, they're Palestinian territories in Israel for the moment. But if you can see on there, you can see Jerusalem, you see Bethlehem, you see Jerusalem, then down at the bottom is where Abraham and Isaac and all of their brothers live. So I just want to show you that these are real places that we're studying that have a huge impact to our world because of what happened back in biblical days. Now, Joseph eventually is in prison. Pharaoh comes to him, hears that he interprets dreams, and so what he does is he says, I need to speak to Joseph. Joseph goes in front of Pharaoh. Pharaoh says, oh my gosh, I want you to be second in command. All right, so now Joseph has the job. He tells him there's going to be 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine. Okay, so what happens now is that Joseph is down there. All the brothers are up in Israel. They don't even know Joseph's anywhere near where he's at. And suddenly there's a famine, and Jacob, the father, says, we need some food, boys. You need to go down to Egypt and get some. They come down to Egypt, and voila, Joseph is handing out food. Joseph doesn't look like Joseph. He looks like an Egyptian now. And the boys don't recognize him. And it's this big, wonderful story and wonderful scene. And Joseph finally reveals himself, and he says, you know what, I need you to go up and get Dad, and all of my brothers and all of the cousins and kids and bring them down to Egypt, because this famine's going to last for 7 years, and I want you to be with me. Okay, so that's how the Israelites got into Egypt, okay? And so that's where we are now. What happens next is, if you look at your timeline there, you see 1875 BC, Jacob and his family is in Egypt, and then 1806, you have the death of Joseph. Now, the Israelites are stuck in Egypt. So we got to always remember that, because that's where that's where Joshua comes in. Now, Exodus 1:6, here's your first verse. Then Joseph died, and all his brothers and all that generation. But the descendants of Israel were fruitful and increased abundantly. They multiplied and grew exceedingly strong, and the land was full of them. Now a new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. He said to his people, "Behold, the Israelites are too many and too mighty for us, and they outnumber us both in people and in strength. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they multiply more, and should war befall us, they join our enemies, fight against us, and escape out of the land." So they set over the Israelites taskmasters to afflict and oppress them with the increased burdens. The Israelites built Pithom and Ramses as store cities for Pharaoh. But the more the Egyptians oppressed them, the more they multiplied and expanded. So the Egyptians were vexed and alarmed because of the Israelites. So you see what's going on. It's like they're in a country, they're growing crazily. They're getting more and more of the Israelites than the Egyptians. And the Egyptians are like, yeah, we're not doing this anymore. Now, I put a little excerpt in there for you that say, well, did the Israelites work on the pyramids? And I put a thing in your handout on that. You can read it on your own time. Verse 22. Then Pharaoh charged all of his people, saying, "Every son born to the Hebrews you shall cast into the river Nile, but every daughter you shall allow to live." So that's where Moses comes in the picture. Now, for those of you that have seen the movie The Ten Commandments, or you'll remember that Moses was born. He was kind of cute. His parents knew that God had a call in his life. So instead of letting the Egyptians kill him, they hid him. And then they put him in a little basket, sent him down the Nile River, and right in front of Pharaoh's little palace, his daughter was out washing something, sees this cute little baby going by. She decides to adopt him. Okay, so Moses ends up growing up in the household of Pharaoh, so he knows the Egyptian ways. He knows all of that. Now, Moses' job is to get the Israelites that are stuck now in Egypt back to the homeland in Israel. The promised land is what they call them. So here's what Moses' purpose was in Exodus 3:8. "And I have come down to deliver them out of the hand and power of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land to a good land, a good and large land, a land flowing with milk and honey, and of plenty." Now, we were at the movies the other day, and I don't know if you have been to the movies and you've seen this trailer, but this is kind of really super exciting. You know how they did the movie Noah? I don't think that turned out really well biblically. I never saw it, actually, because I heard such bad stuff about it. But here's the trailer for a new movie coming out called Exodus, Gods and Kings. Ooh, isn't that like so exciting? I can't wait for it to come out. I hope it's, I had to really study that whole thing on what Ramses, was he really close, like brothers to Pharaoh? I don't think that was true, but a little Hollywood in there, but you get the point. And that's what Moses' job was to do, is to get those people out of there. Now, for 400 years, just like he said 400 years, and all the Israelites were like, "I'm confused. I thought that God was, had this land for us, and we're stuck in this one place that I don't really want to be right now." And it dawned on me that some of you are right there. And some of you are stuck right now in a place that you just really don't want to be, and you're still sick, and you're still married to the guy who isn't that nice, and you're battling depression, and you're waiting to get pregnant, and you're waiting to get married, and you're waiting to get divorced. I don't know what the deal is, but I want you to know that during those 400 years that these guys stayed in, or that these people stayed in Egypt, God really never forgot them. He knew exactly what was going on, and there's always a purpose behind everything. And if you can go through that and say, yes, I'm going through some part of my 400 years, but I know that God is involved in it. He has not forgotten you. Now, Moses comes along. As you see, there's plagues. There's all of these things. Finally, after the last plague, Pharaoh says, "I give," okay, and he says, "Let's let the people go." Look at Exodus 12:37. The Israelites journeyed from Ramses to Succoth, about 600,000 men on foot, besides women and children, and a mixed multitude went also with them, very much livestock, both flocks and herds. Now think about it, 600,000 men. And now you've got, most of those men are probably married. You have very elderly people. I always say there's probably not a lot to do back then, so they probably had a lot of sex and they probably had a lot of kids, is my thinking. So that's where you get the 2 million number, okay? So there's lots and lots of there's a lot of people going on here. Now, I was trying to figure this out. 2 million people. I looked to see what is the largest football stadium is in the United States, and it is the University of Michigan. It has 115,000 seats. We're talking that, and that's only 115,000. Now multiply that times like 18. And this is what Moses' job was, to get all of those people. Now remember, there's no email, text. There's no phone calls like, hey, I'm number 1 in line and you're number 2 millionth, and this is what's going on. Then I started thinking yesterday, you know that game like telephone? Like think about like Moses said this, by the time you've got 2 million person down the line, whatever Moses said wasn't really what Moses said, okay? So I think this is a huge, huge undertaking. And this is what it dawned on me this week. When Moses got this job, I think he thought it was going to be a short-term mission trip. Like that was it. I'm going, this is a 2 or 3 week job, and we'll see in a second. It's not that far from where he was to where he was going. So you just like, follow me. You camp at the night, follow me, and then we're there. And then he's done with all of these people. So in his mind, it's a part-time job. But look what Moses' advice was to all the people when they started out. Exodus 13:3, and Moses said to the people, earnestly remember this day in which you came out from Egypt, out of the house of bondage and bondmen. For by strength of hand, the Lord brought you out from this place. And when I read that this week, I want us to do the same thing. I want us to remember that everything that we have in our life, our jobs, our families, our children, our grandchildren, everything that you have, if you're smart, if you've got a good job, if you've got everything, is because of God. He has given this to you. He's blessed this with you. And he wants us to always remember that. Thank you, God, for my job. Thank you for my children. Thank you for my home. Thank you. Because he's provided those. And I think that was great advice for what Moses was trying to get through. Now, look at Exodus 13:17. When Pharaoh let the people go, God led them not by the way of the land of the Philistines, although that was nearer. For God said, lest the people change their purpose, and when they see war, they'll return to Egypt. But God led the people around by the way of the wilderness towards the Red Sea. Now, this became one of my 2 points today, because I'd never seen this before until last week, and it dawned on me, God could have taken them a shortcut, but he didn't. He took them the long way around, because this is what I realized. The long way around is when you and I are going to learn a lot about God. And we're going to learn how to trust him when we're going the long way around. I thought about this when we lost all of our money. I kept thinking, okay, God, we don't have any money this month, but I'm sure we're going to have some next month because you're going to bring an investor. And the month turned to the next month and the next month and the year and the following year. And I realized that was our long way around. Like God could have done something back here, but he said, no, I'm going to take your money away, and then I want you to learn how to trust me and see what that really means, to where you can't make payroll and you don't know what to do, so you have to turn to me. And you need to pray and trust me that I will provide for you. And for all the years, God provided, and I've told you the stories before, in the most miraculous ways I can't even tell you. So, but had God taken us the short way, we never would have learned that. So think about that when you're going through your life and you're like, oh, I'm just still single and I just want to be married. Well, you know what? It's a long way around. God wants to teach you something during that time. You're still sick. You're like, when am I ever going to stop being sick? When is my marriage ever going to get better? Let God take you the long way around and learn those lessons that he wants you to learn. Now, I put there's a map here of Egypt, because I want you to see this. Like, look at the Red Sea. Now, Moses, of course, God parts the Red Sea. But I'm going to assume from a couple other maps that if you look at Giza right there, right by Cairo, I'm assuming that that's probably the area that, nobody really knows for sure. I'm going to assume that that's probably the area where these 2 million people were. Now, if you look straight, God could have just led them right there. You don't even have to go through the Red Sea, right over the top by the Mediterranean. And guess what? Israel's right there. Like, it's just not even that far away. But God says, nope, I'm not going to do that. Look at this next map. This is the route of the Exodus. I'm going to take them down. I'm going to hem them in so that they can't go anywhere except across the Red Sea. Then I'm going to take them all the way down to Mount Sinai and all the way up. And that whole red line is their route that they took. And I love that, because I just think that that's a really good message to some of us today. It says, you're like, well, why can't I get the job today? And why can't I get over my sickness today? And why can't I get through school faster? And why can't I get over my addiction quicker? And we're constantly wanting things to happen faster. And God steps in and says, no, I want you to know that I'm taking you the long way around, because it's the long way that we really, really get to know God. Now, I thought about Joseph when I was thinking about this, and I thought, okay, the journey that Joseph was on was just horrific. It's like he's perfectly happy at home. He ends up, his brothers hate him. He's on a slave trader thing to Egypt. He goes to Egypt. He gets falsely accused. He's in prison. You're talking years and years and years. And in my mind, I'm like, God, why didn't you just go give Pharaoh a dream one night, say, hey, you need to go talk to this guy Joseph, get your little chariot, run to Egypt, knock on his door and say, hey, I need you in Egypt. Okay, that would have been so much simpler and so much easier on Joseph. But God doesn't work that way, because Joseph, his story is so impactful to our lives today, thousands of years later, because God took him the long way around. And some of you are in that long way around. I want you to embrace that. I don't want you to run from it, because God, that's when we can learn who God is. It's those times when the test comes back and says, yeah, you are sick. And you may not die, okay, but a lot's gonna have to change. It's in that day that becomes your long way around. Or when your job is terminated and you're like, God, what am I gonna do? I don't have a job anymore. That's the long way around. And we need to learn how to trust God in those particular times, because those are the times that God says, I want you to look to me and I will take care of it, but you need to turn and focus on me. Focus. I was just thinking about this. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and everything else will be added unto us. God says, if you seek me first, always put me first, then I'm going to make sure and take care of all the other stuff. But we have to make our focus him. Now, God takes the Israelites a long way around, but here's a promise to you and to me. Look, Exodus 13:21. The Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead them along the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, that they might travel by day and by night. And to me, that was a really great reminder that God says, look, you're going the long way around, but I'm always with you. I'm never absent from you. It may seem like it. I may be silent. You may question where I am. You may question what I'm doing, but I want you to really recognize that I am always there. I went with the Israelites by nighttime and by daytime, and I led them, and I will do the same for you if you let me. And I think that's the key to this whole thing today. Now, Exodus 14:7, 14:1, it would be nice to put glasses on. And the Lord said to Moses, so now they're wandering around and they're trying to get to Israel. The Lord said to Moses, tell the Israelites to turn back and encamp between Migdol and the Red Sea, before Baal-zephon. You shall encamp opposite it by the sea, for Pharaoh will say of the Israelites, they are entangled in the land. The wilderness has shut them in. And look what God says. I will make stubborn and strong Pharaoh's heart, that he will pursue them. And I will gain honor and glory over Pharaoh and all of his host, and the Egyptians shall know that I am Lord, and they did so. Now, really think about that. God just put them in a really frightening, scary, impossible situation. Go right in front of the Red Sea. You can't go anywhere. The Egyptians are coming after you. What are you going to do? He puts them in this impossible situation. But the worst part about that is that God takes full credit for it. He's like, I did that. That's something that I did because I want people to know me. And they're not going to know me if I just give you everything you want all the time. They're going to know me when I don't give you what you want. You still love me. I make a way when there is no way. And you still love God throughout the whole thing. And that's how people get to know God. And he wanted the Israelites to understand who God was, and he wanted Pharaoh and the Egyptians to know, you have no idea who you're messing with here, okay? I understand you saw the frogs and the whatever weird stuff that happened for those 10 plagues, but wait till you see what I got going on here. So I think we need to change our perspective, and we need to say, instead of looking at your impossible situation and saying, oh, this is impossible, and this is just bad, and my life sucks, and everything, we need to say, you know what? I'm going to believe that God is in whatever my circumstances are. The boss that doesn't like you, the husband that's continually a jerk, the sickness that doesn't go away, the depression that lingers, I'm going to say that is the long way around. And we need to learn how to embrace that instead of always whining and moaning about how sad my life is and it's just miserable. We need to say, no way. God's in this. And I can't wait to show people God because he's doing something in my life. And for me, that just seemed like really, really good news. Because God says, I want you to make my name great. And the only way that's going to happen is if I put you in a bad situation and people can see what I can do. So that's a really good thing. Okay, now I learned this. I don't know why I put this in my handout, but I did. I was talking to someone at my house one day, and I had a meeting at 12 o'clock, and I knew I had to leave the house. But he kept talking, and I couldn't get away right then. And so finally I grabbed myself, and I said, I really have to go. I have to get to a meeting. So I ran out the door, and I got on the 303, and just as I got on there, it was at a dead stop. And I was like, what the heck? I don't have time for this. And as we creeped by, we saw that there had just been an accident. And the police weren't there yet, and no one was there. I literally just got there. And I realized, and I just said, my first reaction was, God, thank you so much that had I left 5 minutes before, that could have been me. I don't even know how the accident happened, but it really could have been me. And then my next thought was this. But even if that was me, God still would want me to say thank you. Because I have to know in my life that God that it's in the accidents, it's in the divorces, it's in the sickness, it's in the bad marriage, it's in the times when you're stuck in Egypt, that God wants to use us. We have to realize that. We can't just put our life on hold like Kristen Taylor said last week and just say, well, I'm just going to wait until I'm better. No, God really honestly wants to use you right where you're at, and how you respond to what he's doing is how people will come to know him. And I would bet to say that some of you that are in really tough situations, God has mighty, mighty plans for you. And the question is, are you going to let him? And that's where we have to allow. Or are we going to take the shortcut and head back to Egypt? Because those are always our options. And for you, that might mean that you're married to someone that really isn't that nice. And you don't even like to be married to him. But you know that you are the only Jesus that he will ever see. He doesn't want anyone else. And you're nice to him, and you're kind to him, and you're loving. But you don't like to be there. Okay? The shortcut says, I'm out of here. This isn't fair to me. This is just wrong. I could go find a really nice Christian husband who would love me and take care of me. But the long way around says, you know what? I'm going to stick this out, and I'm going to love him. I'm going to do everything I can. I'm going to pray. I'm going to stand in the gap like Lynn Childers said, and I'm going to stand in the gap for my husband and hope that he comes to Jesus. It's like you may hate your job. You're sitting here going, I hate my job. But you know that your job is the only place that you at lunchtime can share Jesus with other people. And some people are coming to Christ and they're coming to church with you. And you're so excited about that, but you hate your job. And the shortcut says, I'm out of here. I'm just going to go get another job. But the long way around says, I am going to stick this out, and I'm going to I hate my job, but I'm going to let God use me right here. And see, those are our options in life. We can take the shortcut or the long cut. I told you before, I have this the nail girl. She's Vietnamese, and she became a Christian. She's so adorable. But she hates her job. And I've told her, please don't ever walk away from this job. You are the only Christian I know in the entire nail salon world. And I'm like, you have to be, there's got to be a way that you can start a ministry. And she says, Lisa, I invite people, and they come, but they walk away. But she's got one other girl that's given her life to Christ. So it's so exciting. I think I told you we got our one-way book translated into Italian, and we just now got it translated into Vietnamese. So I'm going to have, probably the next 2 weeks, Vietnamese one-way books. So all of you girls that get your nails done, you can just start handing them out at your nail place, okay? And then they're going to be influxed with it. And then I want this girl to start a ministry, so that's kind of my thinking on that. But if she walks away, what happens? It's like this whole ministry is now gone. So I'm just stay there and go the long way. Now, suddenly, in this particular time, Pharaoh realizes what he's done, and he's like, oh, no, I got to get those Israelites back because I need them. But before that, I have to show you this funny thing I found. I went for a run, but came back after 2 minutes because I forgot something. I forgot I'm out of shape and can't run more than 2 minutes. I love that. So it's kind of like that's what Pharaoh did. He decided to do something and he changed his mind. I laughed at that. This morning I woke up. I can't even believe I'm going to say this in Bible study. I decided this morning how we can know that we're actually gaining weight. Okay, so this is my theory. If if your underwear doesn't fit like it used to, okay, and I thought about this because you know how we're women and we can just rationalize anything? So if our pants are too tight, we're like, oh, the dryer was extra hot, okay? We know that. Like, we are not gaining weight. It's just the dryer. But you cannot get away with that with underwear because, you know, how many times they've been washed? They're washed daily, okay? So they've been in the dryer. So you can't even do that. So I told Rob that this morning, and I could just hear his mind going, please, God, don't let her say that at Bible study today. All right, next verse. Okay, Pharaoh realizes what he's done and changes his mind, okay? And this is what he says. It was told the king of Egypt that the people had fled, and the heart of Pharaoh and his servants was changed toward the people. And they said, what is this that we've done? We have let Israel go from serving us. And he made ready his chariots and took his army and took 600 chosen chariots and all the other chariots of Egypt with officers over all of them. The Lord made hard and strong the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he pursued the Israelites, for they left proudly and defiantly. The Egyptians pursued them, all the horses and chariots of Pharaoh and the horsemen and his army, and overtook them and camped at the Red Sea. Now, I love that because God always takes responsibility for this. He's getting ready to freak out the Israelites really badly. Like if you see 600 chariots coming after you and you're standing there with nowhere to go, and God's saying, I'm doing that. I've turned his heart. I turned his heart to let you go, and now I'm turning his heart because I want you to see, Israel, how awesome I really am, and that I can do anything. And that's what I want from this series, for us to suddenly see God in this whole new way, that he's so big and powerful and mighty, and he's not just up there just wondering what to do with your life. Like he has a purpose and a plan, just like he did for Moses and Joshua. We will meet Joshua in a second. Exodus 14. When Pharaoh drew near, the Israelites looked up, and behold, the Egyptians were marching after them. The Israelites were exceedingly frightened and cried out to the Lord. And they said to Moses, listen to these people and see if it sounds like us. Is it because there are no graves in Egypt that you've taken us away to die in the wilderness? Why have you treated us this way and brought us out of Egypt? I love this one. Did we not tell you in Egypt, let us alone, let us serve the Egyptians? Really? For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness. Wah, wah. I mean, you can just hear that. And you're just like, are you serious? Like, you worked like 7 days a week, probably 18 hours a day, hard labor, no days off. You didn't get a 2-week vacation, clearly. And you're whining because, like, at least you're free. Like, if you die, at least it's by the water. That's kind of my thinking on that. But better in Egypt. But don't we do that? Don't we do so? Like God does something where we're like, oh, I was better off when I wasn't married. You told me to marry this guy, and I really believed it, but I'm better off without him. What? I mean, we just do those things. And God's like, please don't do that. So look what Moses says. Moses told the people, I love this, fear not, stand still, firm, confident, and undismayed, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. For the Egyptians you have seen today, you shall never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you shall hold your peace and remain at rest. Now, I love that. It's like very, very scary situations, and some of you are frightened of everything right now. There's Ebola. There's ISIS. I told Rob, I said, I don't even want to plan anything from here to 2 years because we live like where there's a mountain, and I said, someday I'm just looking out and waiting for ISIS to come over the mountain, okay? But it's like, I'm not afraid if that happens because I know God, and I know he's in control, and he's in charge, and if he wants me, whatever, I'm not going to worry about it. But the thing is the only way to get over being fearful is to be put in very, very fearful situations. And you have a choice. You're either going to fall apart or you're going to say, okay, God, I am so scared right now, but I am going to literally just trust you beyond anything. And that's what God wants from us. Now, the Lord said to Moses in the next verse, verse 15, why do you cry to me? Tell the people of Israel to go forward. Now, I think that's funny. Go forward? There's water there. Wow, do you want us to swim? Like, what are you thinking, God? And look what he says. Lift up your rod and stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it. The Israelites shall go on the dry ground through the midst of the sea. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night and made the sea dry land. And the waters were divided, and the Israelites went into the midst of the sea on dry ground, the waters being a wall to them on their right and their left. I thought it was so funny. Here's Moses, and he's fishing. And so he parts the sea right where his friend is fishing so he can't get any fish. He's like, not funny, Moses. I thought that was so cute. But anyway, verse 23, the Egyptians pursued them, and of course we all know the waters came over and fell over everything. For the sake of time, we won't even read that. But the waters came down, the Israelites walked through, the wall of waters went down on Pharaoh and his men, and they were all killed. Okay, now we are talking huge miracle. If you were an Israelite then and saw that, you would be like, my God is so awesome, he can do anything. Okay, but unfortunately, that's not what happened with them. And here's what I was thinking. You and I will never know that God can, and you fill in the blank. You and I will never know that God can save our marriage or heal a sickness or bring a child home if we don't take the long way around and we just don't run from everything and run from God. We'll never know that God can if we don't let him. And the Israelites would never know that God could part a sea and let them walk through on dry land if they had run back to Egypt, because it's just much easier to run back to Egypt. And I don't want any of us to do that here. Now, all of this is to set up Joshua, our little man Joshua, because I want you to see why Joshua is where he is. Joshua was there. He was an Israelite at this particular time in his life. He's about 20 years old. He has been an Israelite enslaved to Egypt for the last 20 years since he was born. So think about that. He never knew Abraham and Isaac, and he never knew Joseph, and he never knew of this God. But suddenly he saw that this God that Moses is talking about gets him out of Egypt. And then suddenly Joshua sees that the land or the waters parted. And Joshua's going, this is kind of an awesome God that we believe in. And that's who Joshua is. Now, Joshua, I look for him to be sort of like a modern day, I say a army ranger. Here's my picture of him. So whenever you think of Joshua, this is what we're going to think of. He was a fighter. He was a warrior. He loved God. You see him on his, I just think he's praying. That's kind of my thinking on that. But Joshua is just kind of a really awesome guy. And we see the first time we meet Joshua, it's in Exodus 17. And as the Israelites are moving onto the land, what happens is they come across this nomad group called the Amalekites. And suddenly they have to be fighting men, and they have to fight the Amalekites. And these guys, remember, they're just Egyptian slaves. They're not fighters. And so look what Exodus 17:9 says. This is where we meet Joshua. And Moses said to Joshua, now I think about that. Moses said that to Joshua because I bet you anything Joshua was always by Moses. Moses, what can I do to help you? Moses, what can I do to serve you? Moses, I'm just here for you. Okay, he's 20. And what we begin to see is that Moses takes Joshua under his wing, and they're very, very, very close. So they come across the Amalekites, and Moses is probably saying, well, let's see how he does. And Moses said to Joshua, choose us out men and go out and fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand. And that's why I think he's like an army ranger, because I think that's what his job is. He's a fighter. He's a warrior. And Exodus 17:13 says, and Joshua mowed down and disabled Amalek and his people with a sword. Now, something about that hit me, because here you've got Moses on the top of the mountain praying, and you have Joshua down in the valley fighting. And it was just a great reminder of me that that's what we do. God does his part, we do our part. If you want a good marriage, let's just say, you need to be praying for your husband and praying for you and praying for your attitude and praying for, but on the opposite side, you need to be reading the word. And you need to say, God, what am I supposed to do as a wife? You tell me to respect my husband. What does that mean? Okay? I'm not worried about my husband loving me. I'm worrying about me respecting him. And then you go do it. And you're praying, and between the prayer that you're praying to God, God will do his part. But we have to do ours. Okay? If you want a job, you're like, oh, God, I just need a job. Well, he's like, okay, you're praying. God, please open the doors. Okay? Now go fill out some applications and go and actually ask for an interview. Like, we have to do both. And that's what God really showed me with this. Now, we see then in Exodus 24, look who was with Moses when he went up to get the 10 Commandments. And the Lord said to Moses, come up to me in the mountain and be there, and I will give you tables of stone with the law and commandments which I have written that you teach them. So Moses rose up with Joshua, his attendant, and Moses went up into the mountain of God. So Joshua was pretty much an attendant of Moses. Exodus 33:11, and the Lord spoke to Moses face to face as a man speaks to his friend. Moses returned to the camp, but his minister Joshua, son of Nun, a young man, did not depart from the temporary prayer tent. It seems like Joshua was also a prayer warrior. Now, right before the Israelites get ready to go into the land, Moses said, I need to get some guys and spy out the land. I need you to go. I want you to be gone for 40 days. So they sent out, 10 or 12, I can't remember now. They sent out these 12, I think it was 12. They sent out these 12 guys to search out the land to see exactly, what's the best route, what are we up against, those kind of things. Now, when they came back, look at what they said. Verse 13, Numbers 13:16. These are the names of the men whom Moses sent out to explore and scout out the land. And Moses called Hoshea, son of Nun, Joshua. So we know he was one of them. They returned, verse 25. And they returned from scouting out the land after 40 days. They came to Moses and Aaron and said to the Israelite congregation in the wilderness of Paran at Kadesh, and brought them word and showed them the land's fruit. They told Moses, we came to the land to which you sent us. Surely it flows with milk and honey. This is the fruit. So they're like, this is such awesome. Like, look, this is where we're going. Fruit. We don't have to eat the Egyptian food anymore. Verse 28. But the people who dwell there, here's the but, are strong. And the cities are fortified and very large. Moreover, they saw the sons of Anak of great stature and courage. But Caleb, who was Joshua's other guy that ends up just like Joshua, Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once and possess it. We are well able to conquer it. Because for Joshua and for Caleb, they saw God as this big God that could do anything. And all of the other spies went into their baby mode. Okay, they just saw it, for crying out loud. They just saw God just part a Red Sea, and they walked through and killed all the Egyptians. You'd think they would be like, God can do anything. Like, so what, they're big and they're fortified cities. Whatever. No, we can't do it. They went into their whining mode all over again. We can't do it. We're so, like, they're so big, and we're like little grasshoppers. That's what they said. And then Numbers 14, 1 through 10. And all the congregation cried out with a loud voice, and they wept that night. They grumbled and deplored their situation, accusing Moses and Aaron, to whom the whole congregation said, would that we had died in Egypt. I think I should like learn how to voice over, right? Or that we died. Okay, anyway, you can hear their whininess. Go down to verse 7. Let's go to 5. Then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before the assembly of the Israelites, and Joshua, son of Nun, and Caleb, who were among the scouts who had searched the land, rent their clothes, and they said to all the company of the Israelites, the land through which we passed as scouts is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord delights in us, he will bring us into the land and give it to us, a land flowing with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord, neither fear the people of the land, for they are bread for us. Their defense and the shadow of protection is removed from them, but the Lord is with them. Fear not. But all the congregation said to stone Joshua and Caleb with stones. Okay, so this is the 2 million people that Moses and Joshua had to deal with. Now, I'm assuming at this point, Joshua, Caleb, and Moses are saying, let's get these people into Israel. I'm sick of them. They're driving me crazy. Because remember, this is a quick trip. But then God steps in and does something that will change Moses and Joshua's life forever. And look what he says in Numbers 14:27. How long will this evil congregation murmur against me? I have heard the complaints the Israelites murmur against me. Tell them, as I live, says the Lord, what you have said in my hearing, I will do to you. Your dead bodies shall fall in this wilderness. Of all who were numbered of you from 20 years old and upward, who have murmured against me, surely none shall come into the land in which I swore to you, except Caleb and Joshua. After the number of the days in which you spied out the land, even 40 days, for each day a year, shall you bear and suffer for your iniquities, even for 40 years, and you shall know my displeasure. Now think about that. Could you imagine what Moses was thinking? Whoa, God. Like, wait. This is not what I signed up for. Like, I'm here for the short mission trip. I am not here for the long haul. 40 years? No way. This was a 2-week thing. I'm not doing this anymore. But God says, no. This is your lot in life. And it was just a reminder to me that some of you are Joshua and Caleb's and Moses's, and you are living in tough situations. But you know what? God's placed you there. And you can run back to Egypt like all the whiny other people wanted to do, or you can stand strong and you can say, I am not going to let this problem win. Moses didn't say, I'm out of here, God. He said, all right, God, my life is yours. I'll do whatever you want me to do. And for 40 miserable years. He walked with these whiny people. And always know this. I look at Saeed. He's sitting in prison in Iran. And he's like, God, I just signed up for building an orphanage. I just love kids. I want them to come to Jesus. I'm going to build an orphanage. And he's in 8 years in a prison sentence. And it's one of those things, it's a long way around, and it's just how God does it. And some of you are on the good side of that, and some of you aren't. And I don't know how to make that any better. But here's my second point that I want you to learn. I can't remember if this is what's on the card. Is that just because you are at a place where you do not want to be does not mean that you are at a place where what that means is you're at a place where God wants to use you. Just because you're somewhere you don't want to be, always know you're still at a place that God wants to use you. Moses and Joshua probably did not want to be traveling with the Israelites for 40 years. But God wanted to use them right there. And when we say thousands of years later, we have this incredible story of Joshua because he went through the 40 years with these people. Now, I want to end with Kristen Taylor. Most of you know she's supposed to be with us on November 3rd or 4th, whatever that was. She will not be here. Her daughter is very sick. They took her back to some, Michigan, Minnesota, to a big center back there, hospital. She's they traveled. They had to stop along the way. They thought they were going to have to take her off the airplane and put her into a hospital. They said, no, we're going to hurry and get there. They got her there. They changed out stents. She has to be 4 weeks stable in order to even have a stent or pancreas transplant is what they're hoping to do. She pretty much just crashed. She's lost 4 pounds. She's a mess, okay? So they're back there. But this is what Kristen wrote, because here's the deal. Just like Moses and just like many of you, and just like Kristen, you're at a place where you just don't want to be at. It's just not fun where you're at. But God is using Kristen in mighty ways, just like he's used Moses. And he wants to use you. You've just got to give in to him and let him. Look what she says. I wrote it in your handout. She said, this week did not go exactly as I expected. One day we left a joyful charity benefit with Rebecca on stage auctioning her blanket. By the way, Rebecca made this blanket. She quilted it. She thought it would go for like $100. Someone bought it for $4,100. Okay, so that's how cute this little girl is. She said the next she was in a wheelchair, barely lifting her head from pain. One day we leave balmy 90-degree weather. The next we enter ice-cold temperatures, 65 degrees cooler. One day we were holding a schedule of outpatient appointments. The next we are inpatient with all the appointments redirected to the hospital room. One day Rebecca is stable. The next, her pancreatic and liver enzymes are severely elevated. One day, we're planning Brian's birthday celebration at home with the boys. The next, we are listening to their voices solemnly singing happy birthday over a phone. One day, I am assuring Alexandra I'll be home soon. The next, I am buying months' worth of warm clothing, never to be worn beyond this particular season in our lives. The difference of one day can be shocking. We learned that with Moses. Weeks like this clearly remind me how God is in control. I have a hard time not laughing in the face of planners. I used to be one. I made list after list of daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly plans. I was organized, scheduled, and on track for my idea of how my family's future would look like. My hopes, my desires, my dreams, my. I have not accomplished a single list in over 4 years. 4.5 very long years. Everything I schedule, everything I plan is somehow turned upside down, and I'm forced to depend on a second-by-second, minutes are too long, flexibility which ever changing. And I love this. But I have discovered something in this out-of-control existence I am now a part of. When I am forced to give up my plans, I am forced to give in to God's. Always remember that. When I am forced to give up on my plans, I am forced to give in to God's plans. And by erasing my calendar and burning my lists, I get the first-hand privilege of experiencing the Lord's manna for the day, the very sustenance I require to get through this complicated and arduous journey. And Moses had to learn that, and you and I might have to learn that also. And here's a quick test I want you to see, that if you're in that place where you're wandering like 40 years, I can imagine God coming to Moses and saying this, Moses, do you love me regardless? And that needs to be a question for you. Are you going to love God regardless of what you do? Do you trust that I am in this, God says? Do you believe I am leading you? Do you believe wandering in the wilderness 40 years is part of my plan for your life? When all of this is over, will you love me more or less? When all of this is over, will people see me in you? When the trial is complete, will people want to know me because of your attitude? And after 40 years, has your perspective on me changed? And as we begin the life of Joshua, I want us to really understand that God's ways are always different. He wants to take us the long way around. And here's my thing. Embrace where you are. Embrace the sickness, the singleness, the bad marriage, the what. Embrace it and say, you know what? It may not be where I want to be right now, but God, I know it's exactly where you want me to be. Now use me where I am. God, thank you for the life of Joshua and Moses and everything that they're teaching us that we're going to learn in this series. Thank you that they took the long way around. They didn't take the shortcut. Thank you that they went ahead and listened to you and obeyed you and stuck in something that was very, very difficult. And I pray, God, for each person here and listening to us, that you will help us to do that. Give us the courage to do that, to focus on you every single day for what you want out of our life, not what we want. Help us to burn our lists. Help us to burn everything that has anything to do with what we want and move that over to God. What do you want from me? Because I just want to live for you. Bless these women in Jesus' name. Amen. Just to say, God, I'm adding you into my equation. I'm adding you into this problem. And when God had a purpose for his pit, just like he has a purpose for your pit that you're into, he's not going to let you down. When you believe the Bible and the Bible alone, I said, that's what we... Suddenly one day you're going to wake up and you're going to be like, I don't really have animosity towards that person anymore. But I promise you that I think today you'll be really, really encouraged at the very end, because I learned something I never even thought